Content Delivery Summit here at Streaming Media Europe. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the editor of Streaming Media Magazine and the program director for all the Streaming Media Europe events. If you're planning on returning tomorrow and or Wednesday for any of those events, those will be over at the Olympia Conference Center. Today, we've got this event here. We also have several in-depth workshops going on down the hall as part of Streaming Media Europe. We started the Content Delivery Summit, Dan Rayburn in the U.S. started it as part of Streaming Media East 3 years ago, and last year we started it here in London, and are taking decided to take a very different approach than most industry events and even our U.S. Content Delivery Summit in terms of really using this time to encourage dialogue and discussion and an effort to move the industry and the marketplace forward rather than simply offer you a series of PowerPoint presentations that you've seen elsewhere dozens of times before. So I think Dom Robinson has done a terrific job of bringing together some of the leading thinkers in the content delivery world, as well as broadcasters who are using content delivery networks to talk about the issues facing the industry today. Before I introduce Dom, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Lunch will be at 12:30 to 1:30, and it's in the restaurant upstairs. And this morning and afternoon, coffee breaks will be in here. We were going to present the Streaming Media Reader's Choice Award for Delivery Network at the afternoon coffee break, and ultimately decided that no, we're going to present all of the awards tomorrow at the reception at Streaming Media Europe at Olympia. And finally, the Beers for Peers at 5:30, I believe that begins, is in, I'm not sure which room exactly, we'll find out, but it's down the hall at the other end of this level. So with that, I'd like to welcome you all here. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to a good and stimulating discussion. And I'd like to introduce the program chair for the Content Delivery Summit and Streaming Media contributing editor, Dom Robinson.
Thanks, Eric. Actually, Martin, I might grab a roving mic a bit later if that's right, but I'll stay at the podium for the moment. So I want to try to keep today very informal. Last year we broke the ice a little bit, so I'm going to do that right now by asking you just to introduce yourselves for the moment to the people on your table. Swap a business card, tell everyone what you do. We've got an interesting grouping here because these are the content providers, so you can come and victimise them for being clientele later. That's just by chance. But I'd like you just to take a moment just to introduce yourselves while Richard comes up to the stage and we open the day in a second. So yeah, as Eric says, I like to keep the day very informal to encourage participation. I take part in a number of other events where we see a lot of CDNs talking about what they do, what they deliver. I think we've all got the idea of what a CDN in principle does. Here today we're looking at the nuances, we're looking at technical challenges that these guys face that they'd like us as an industry sector to help them improve on. Last year I think probably the most exciting example was on the application trends panel. We had Microsoft, Adobe, similar lineup to the one today, all talking about the server platforms. And during the course of the discussion, one of the questions that was raised was about logging for adaptive bitrate technologies, and some of these CDNs were receiving in as much logging data as they were sending video out because of the chunked nature of HTTP. And I think over the last 12 months, we've seen the server platforms modify their logging strategy. So now we get a single log file for a single video played, and that's, I think, improved things for the content providers. So hopefully over the course of today, we're going to get at least one more gem like that. We're going to build up to a bit of an experimental session on CDN Federation at the end of the day. We've touched on this at a number of different events over the year. I think CDN Federation needs to actually get a bit of a call to arms and stop being wouldn't it be nice, and become a discussion about actually let's do this. And so I've asked a couple of key players who've been shouting about CDN Federation for a long time to come and try to actually, if you like, drive a panel session from all of you. So be ready to speak today. And throughout the day, if you have questions, put your hand up, get involved, heckle politely, please. And also, make sure you network as much as possible. We started a thing called the Content Delivery Summit Social Network on a whiteboard last year. It's low tech, so it's quite easy to use. You just write your email on it, and I'll put it on a LinkedIn group, and then you can stay in touch with everybody. Anyway, while you guys all introduce yourselves and swap a business card with everyone at your table, those that you don't work with, presumably, I'm going to ask Richard Cooper to come up and speak about the BBC. So, Richard.
That's all right. I just need to use glasses these days. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Please now stop introducing each other. Let me introduce Richard.
Thanks. Now you've met everybody. You can meet me. I'm Richard Cooper. I run a group for the BBC called the Online Technology Group, and the function of that group is to we build the platform that all of BBC Online's products are built on board. So we look after the servers and the software stacks and so on. We're also responsible for the distribution of all of the BBC's online products. The one I'm going to talk about today, or I'm going to talk around today, is iPlayer. So quick show of hands, who's UK based here? Yeah. Anyone not European? From the States, no, yes. Russia. Oh, right. Now, in theory, in Russia, you shouldn't be able to get access to iPlayer. I'm sure you know how to do it. That would be one of the challenges of how to solve, by the way. But there we go. So I'll dive straight in. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you a bit of usage information. So we've been running iPlayer now for 4 years. It's just coming up to its 4th birthday. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of data about how it's been used, times a day, numbers, what the growth patterns look like, and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about how it works, some of the challenges we have with that. Then end user experience is critical for all of these things. And I'll look at the end user experience and a bit of data around how we've seen ISP performance changing over the time that we had iPlayer running from a content provider's perspective. And finally, a few of the things that are keeping us awake at night. So first of all, iPlayer. It was born on Christmas Day, 2007, much to the disgust of the engineers who had to make it run. And we've been evolving it ever since. The latest incarnation actually is no longer just BBC content. We also include links through to other providers' content. We find that people don't necessarily know what channel anything's on, so if they come along, if you type in Coronation Street, we'll take you through to Coronation Street, given that we don't do that one ourselves. These products are only as good as the content you put them on. Doesn't matter how good your engineering is. And the big hitters for us are still the same. It's Top Gear, Torchwood was going very well, EastEnders, one of our regular soaps, and Doctor Who, which actually gave us the biggest day we've ever had, the final episode of the latest version of Doctor Who. So looking at consumption, this is over the last couple of years. We've got both radio and TV content in it. And this kind of doesn't quite do it justice. It shows, August is the latest figures that I've got for you. 91 million requests for video in August, 40 million requests for radio. Actually, radio and video consumption are very, very, very different. So video consumption primarily is on demand. So 85% of all consumption of video is on demand, only 15% is live. Radio is kind of the other way around. 77% of radio consumption is live, and people's listen to radio for about twice as long as they watch TV. Plus, time of day is very different. Radio tends to be middle of the day. My microphone just gone? No. And probably gives an indication of the fact that people are listening to radio while they're at work. Looking at that just from a daily use perspective, we get about 4.2 million requests per day. And that comes from about 1.6 million users we see every day. And if you look at that in terms of unique users, or what I really mean is unique user agents, over a week, it's about 6.8 million, so just under 7 million users come to it every week, so it's getting quite substantial. Those users on average, it's about 70 minutes, just under 70 minutes of video that each user will watch each week, so we've still got a little way to go to catch up with broadcast telly. Broadcast telly, about 216 minutes a day. do the maths on quickly, 1,500 or thereabouts minutes a week. So 1,500 broadcast telly minutes versus 70 on iPlayer. So we've got a little way to go, but we're gradually getting there. Looking at consumption by time of day, is there anybody here who runs similar services in is doing on-demand services? I'd be interested to see if you have the same patterns. So this shows consumption of our internet services in total, which is the blue line, of our TV channels, which is this solid block here, and of iPlayer video consumption, all on the same slide. We've cheated, obviously, in terms of the vertical axis, because they sure as hell aren't the same. But it shows that consumption on demand over IP, we shift it later by about an hour, so we kind of extend the evening. We're not competing with the same eyeball time. We're actually growing eyeball time. And we also get more consumption happening during the day. Do you get similar experiences? Yep, similar numbers, I think. I'll talk about some of the other platforms in a moment, though, because that's primarily driven by PC consumption. Others vary. Right, now looking at traffic, part of my job is distribution, so this is now data rather than users. This pretty well goes back to the beginning of time for iPlayer. So my data here starts in April 2008 and runs to the current day. The colours break it down in terms of years, so you can kind of see how the patterns go during the year. And it's a pretty common trend. We tend to find things reasonably flat in the middle of the year. It's the same as TV viewing. The weather's nice, people tend not to go online. We get a big jump in October and it grows up through to the Christmas period. This year was a little bit different. We introduced adaptive bitrate in 2009, which made a significant difference in terms of the amount of traffic we delivered, with the same thing, strong growth in the autumn. And then we get a kind of repeating pattern, stays flat and then growth in the winter. And we're now into this year, where it's kind of flat. I haven't got October on there, but it looks like, the person responsible for distribution, I'm kind of thinking, is it going to stop? But it looks like we're getting the same growth all over again, so a nice big jump in October as our programs get stronger and the nights get shorter and longer and people spend more time watching telly. So, like everybody, big push to get onto other devices. We just recently launched a new version onto the PlayStation. We found doing this much harder than I think we originally anticipated. Getting onto games consoles, connected devices and so on, the connected tellies. Technologies are all different, and a lot of them are very much kind of first-generation devices. In terms of performance, they're quite slow. Getting a good, slick user experience can be quite hard work. Typically, video playback, they work on the basis that they can decode MPEG-4 in the box, and so that's all you need to do. And of course, it's much more, we need good control over buffer management. We need the ability to do adaptive bitrate and all that sort of thing to give users a really good experience, because we find that picture quality is important. Buffering is, of course, the most important thing. As soon as you go into buffering, you lose people. And if you get, once playback has started, if you get more than 2 buffering events, that's it. You've pretty well lost the lot, I think. One thing we have seen is a very different characteristic around consumption when people are watching content on TV, so our IP content over TVs, where you can also watch broadcast content, because, of course, we've now got contention between the two. On the PC, we have pretty well exclusive access to eyeballs. On the TV, we don't. We're competing. And we did see on one day a significant reduction in our traffic going through to PlayStation, enough to send our alarms off. And we assumed that something was broken. It wasn't something broken. It just happened to be the X Factor final last year. And competition for telly meant that iPlayer was booted off as everybody watched X Factor. You're not allowed to write that down because X Factor is one of our competitors' programs. So onto the good old iPhone and iPod. We don't actually do an app for these ones. At the moment, this is just a browser-based delivery. Does the job. Consumption on these devices, very different again. So we find that, on the whole, people are using these to watch television in bed. So during the week, we get strong peaks leading up to about 11 o'clock at night. And at the weekend, there's another peak which comes in kind of around 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. So we have the opportunity to work out what time it is that Great Britain gets out of bed. And iPad consumption, exactly the same. So we're seeing again, consumption in the evening, early morning. So it's another television in bed device. So looking at the breakdown of consumption by device, it's still massively dominated by PC consumption. So the blue bars are people consuming stuff on PC. And you can see it's starting to come in. We've got games consoles, as soon as they came in, were reasonably strong. We'll be adding the Xbox soon, and I think that's going to have a significant impact on that. There are a lot of them. Mobile devices are growing. Tablets came from nowhere and are growing fast. And the thing that's not on this chart is the connected tellies. Connected tellies currently tiny in terms of use, but I have to say in terms of growth, they're kind of going meteoric. So one of the things we're really watching is the rate of increase of consumption on those devices. So that's looking at on-demand traffic. We also do a whole heap of live traffic. We have our live channels available as simulcast channels. And as I said, very little consumption online of those. It tends to be around 15% or thereabouts. But that's averaged out. And of course, for anybody who does live streaming, peak to mean is your enemy here. The peaks you get are very, very substantial when they come through for major sporting events. We tend to drive people actually not through to iPlayer. We have separate areas in the site where we do not just the live video, but also a whole host of other things. So we kind of pull in Twitter feeds and provide live commentaries and all that sort of stuff. And if we then look at the data that we deliver for live traffic, you can then see it's a very different shape, and it's driven by events. Quick quiz for you. August 2008, what was that? Olympics. Thank you, yeah. And then in the summer of 2009, even years are big for anybody who streams sport. Even years are big because that's when all the major competitions are. Odd years are quite small by comparison. So that was the Olympics in 2008, obviously dominated that. 2009, the major event there was for Brits was Murray, who did reasonably well in Wimbledon. He got all the way through to the Friday semi-finals before he was heroically knocked out. 2010, that was the Football World Cup. And then 2011, this year, there was Murray being knocked out at exactly the same time. But this stuff at the beginning here, this just shows we had the Arab Spring, which drove a whole heap of traffic, but then the really big deal, of course, was the tsunami, the stories around that, the fantastic video that came out of that. And so we'll see where it goes. So very different characteristic, really big peak to mean. Right, how we put all this stuff together. Sitting on the back end, then there's one little blob here, which media scheduling, transcoding, and publishing systems, which for anybody involved in that stuff, there's a huge amount of work in getting that stuff to go, even having done this for 4 years now. Broadcasters are built around putting together linear channels and getting everything into the position that you need it to be effectively to deliver it online. Is much, much, much harder than you expect it to be. It's harder for a number of reasons. One reason is rights. So we still have major challenges in terms of getting rights for content to make it available on different devices. And that's not a case of just making it available over IP. We have different rights depending upon whether you're viewing it on a PC, on a connected TV, on a games console, or a mobile. Any rights people in the room? Nope. So you can't tell me why that is, and I certainly can't tell you why that is. It's just an enormous complexity. Plus the number of different formats we need to support, which all the time we're trying to harmonise it down, and somehow it keeps going up. And so that gets us to the back end. But the other key systems that we have, when you make a request to play a program, now we have a system that we call media selection, and we look and we see where are you in terms of country. So in other words, can we serve you this media at all? If you're outside the UK, for some media, we'll serve you the content, but we'll serve it at a lower quality. And we also look at what device you're on. And off the back of that, on the fly, we work out all the various different bits of the versions of that media that you can play on that device. So effectively, it's then the adapted bitrate list that we deliver back to you. And that from there, then, it goes back and it makes this request to the CDNs. Our policy here is to always use more than one CDN. CDNs we found are very good, on the whole very reliable, but they have bad days in the same way that we do. And so we'll always aim to have at least two in play, so that in the event of any problem with the connection back down to one, it'll simply fail straight over to another one. And we have 4 in use at the moment, one of which we do ourselves. So that returns then the media. And we use geolocation, so GeoIP is a critical part of what we do. Most of our content's only available in the UK. And so we use it at the site level, so we'll change what we present to you depending on where you're coming from. And we use it at the media selector level to decide what media we're going to serve to you. And then for most of the content, then we also do it at the CDN level. So if you get through all of that and you try and make a request for content, we'll still stop you from doing it. So that's all very well, but critical for us is understanding what the end user experience is like. Because as I said, as soon as you get problems with consumption, A, people complain, and B, they just drop off and go somewhere else. And of course, the delivery chain for over-the-top video is quite a complicated one with a whole heap of players in there, all of whom can play their part in either delivering a great service or delivering a not-so-good one. So it's the content provider's responsibility. We can have a bad day. We don't very often, but we do occasionally, which has an impact. The ISPs can impact it. Of course, there's all the technology that the consumer has in their home, which can cause problems. The consumer networking, the quality of the wiring going into the modems in the home, obviously, quite often a significant impact in terms of the overall performance that you get. All of those can impact on the experience that the content provider gets. So we look at this very hard, and we look at it in two areas. One, traditionally, we pull log files and do deep analysis on that from time to time to see exactly what's going on, diagnose problems and so on. The other is from the players, we take heartbeats back, and you were saying, John, last year that you had a discussion around, can we just have one log file for each playback, or one log file entry? We don't have that at all. We have continuous heartbeats coming back from every single player on every single device that we then analyze. We produce data in real time to see if there's something going wrong, and then we do a whole load of other stuff. And so actually this back-end analysis is increasingly a data warehousing challenge for which, if you haven't got onto it yet, Hadoop is your friend. So we do a whole heap of that. Now, what I traditionally show when looking at end-user performance is some of the problems that we've seen with some ISPs over the years in terms of congestion and at one point in terms of throttling of our services. And I'm not going to do that today because actually the quality at the moment of what we're seeing is extremely high. On the whole, we're not seeing problems. We're not seeing problems with individual networks. We're not seeing huge signs of congestion during the day. We're not seeing a lot of traffic management having an impact on our services. And where we do see that, on the whole, the adaptive bit rate that we use gets around it, which is quite a positive message. Maybe in a year's time I'll be saying something different. I don't know. So instead, I thought I'd just show you the data that we get out of this. So we have a little diagnostics tool built into iPlayer, which means that at any point you can go in, you can test your connection speed, and you can test it to the 4 CDNs that we use to deliver content to it, and do that in real time. Now, there's a big caveat around this, which is that we put this in our FAQs for people to find, and it might get around by word of mouth, and you can find it through Googling it. But that doesn't necessarily mean to say that people who use this are a representative sample of the UK population. Nevertheless, we find pretty good correlation between the data we get out of this tool and the data that we get through mining the stats for the overall service. So it's not a million miles away. And I thought I'd just show you then how the performance of UK ISP networks have changed over the period that we've been running this. So the way it works, if you're familiar with speedtest.net, it's the same underlying technology which powers this. So those are the measurements that it makes for the 4 CDNs, and then the feedback we give you is this is my home connection last night, and we tell you it's perfectly good enough to be able to do radio all the way through to HD. In this particular case, if it isn't, then we'll let you know. And that's the result in terms of what we've measured since the beginning of January 2010. And what I've put on here is this is the average speed measured for all the requests for the various different networks over a period of a month. And the red line is what we've seen on cable networks. The blue line here is a typical DSL network. The green line is a predominantly mobile network. And the purple line there is kind of the average speed that we've been seeing. And the story behind it is not surprising, but quite comforting from people who are trying to deliver this sort of content over the internet, which is that when we started, delivering 1,500 kilobits a second video over a DSL line, where you're seeing speeds on average not that much above 2, is kind of pushing it. Now everything has been getting faster, and that probably explains why we've been seeing less and less problems. And now not only is delivering 1,500 kilobits a second standard def video not really that much of a problem, we're finding a lot of users are able to take our 3.2 or thereabouts megabit per second HD video without too much of a problem. So from our perspective anyway, it's a pretty positive story at the moment. We will see how that develops. Finally, a few of the things around what we have coming next, or what we're worrying about. So we do an awful lot of streaming, flash streaming, RTMP, and over the next year or so, we're going to be getting rid of most of that and replacing it with HLS. We're using both HLS and HDS. People familiar with HDS? People not familiar? Yeah, big nods. Yeah. Whether or not there's room for both of those, I don't know. We'll see. And we're keeping a keen eye on what's happening with the MPEG-Dash initiative of a way of harmonizing all of these things. And at the point at which we've got that properly deployed and up and running, then I think it becomes quite interesting opportunities for disrupted distribution models, because actually then at that point, all of these chunked streams are cacheable, and they're cacheable deep within the network, if you want to do it. We have multiple caching layers in the HDS and HLS delivery that we're doing at the moment. And where operator CDNs are starting to pop up, then there's an opportunity there that rather than those being full CDNs, they could simply be caches sitting in the network if that's what an operator chooses to do. Growth in consumption for non-PC devices, we still see our biggest peaks happening during the day. Those networks that actually deliver the most traffic when we get the really big peak to means are for major events that happen during the day where we have exclusive access to people's eyeballs because they have a PC in front of them at work and they don't have a TV available to them. With the growth of connected TVs and the growth of tablets, I think these big live events, we're going to start seeing more and more of that happening out of hours in the home and so over consumer networks. Growth and demand for high definition. We really don't do very much high definition at the moment. We make about 40 hours a week available, and consumption of it, we don't push people at it very hard, and consumption, although it works perfectly well, is actually pretty low. It's a couple of % of our consumption. Other guys doing these services, are you doing HD? What you call HD? No. No.
We haven't started to stop it. I look, for example, FIOS, United States, they have high definition streams around 5 to 8 megabits per second in the meantime over IPTV. What is your bandwidth? Are you doing, plans to do 80p, 180, 1080?
Not yet. No, we've dabbled our feet in the water here, and we're doing 720p, and doing 720p 25, which for drama works very well. For sport, not so good, and for that we can deliver between 2.8 and 3.2, depending upon the origin of the source and how much care we need to put into it. And then finally, we have a rather big event coming up next year, Olympics 2012. So for this, we're going to be taking there are about 24 different events running simultaneously at peak time. We're going to be carrying all of those events, all information live and on demand throughout the day. And so this is actually going to be a very, very significant event, not just for us, but I think for the kind of UK broadband industry. People will be watching to see how this stuff gets on. And if we don't put on a big show, a good show, that obviously won't be good for the BBC. I'm not sure it'll be good for the UK broadband industry either. And with that, thanks very much.
Well, thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Questions afterwards?
Yeah, so we're going to do questions and answers jointly with Michael after Michael's session. So thank you very much for a very interesting start to the day. I'm not going to yabber on. I'm going to ask Michael to come and give us his presentation. So we're going to contrast, hopefully contrast over the next presentation and the Q&A, the delivery challenges that Richard faces with the BBC and those that Michael Sandbichler, which I hope I've got the name right, faces in Europe. So Michael, please take the stage.
All right, so let's start. Hey everybody, my name is Michael Sandbichler from Prosieben Sat in Germany. I'd like to share our experience with delivering content with CDNs over the years, and we'll also talk about few of the current challenges that we see today. Before we start, if you hear strange noises, it's my stomach. So don't get worried. We missed breakfast somehow and now he's angry with me. Let me start with a few details on myself and on the company I'm working for. I was born in Austria in the beautiful mountains. Oh, thank you. Okay, we'll have a break later on. In 1972, I started a short and not so successful career as ski instructor, had to leave the country, went to Germany, study economics, and somehow ended up as a software developer. After working in the computer business for a few years, I said to myself, there has to be a job that lets me combine all my favorite activities, which is watching TV, play around with computers, and eat traditional Bavarian food the whole day. So I ended up at Prosieben in Munich, which seemed to be the natural choice for me at that time. Here I'm working as head of technology, so I'm responsible for all technical aspects of the online activities of the German free TV channels. This includes operations and development of the traditional web portals, also video on demands. And I was also responsible for design and the implementation of the current video infrastructure, where CDN, of course, is one of the major building blocks. So enough about me. Let's talk about the fabulous company I'm working for. Prosieben Sat, one of Europe's largest broadcasters, #1 TV station in Germany, also for video on demand. And of course, traditional TV is still the most important business sector within the group, but the non-TV activities are growing and getting more important. And most of those activities are concentrated in the unit I'm working for, which is Prosieben Sat Digital. So we have the traditional online portals, we have mobile, we see hybrid TV as one of the upcoming technologies. There's audio tags, and there's the game sector that is growing as well. And if you take out audio tags, all the remaining sectors are relevant for CDN because they use it in this or the other way. Online for both static web caching and video, mobile as well. And same is true for hybrid TV. And the games portal use it for downloading software heavily. Now, before we dig deeper into our current situation, let's have a brief look back. When I was preparing this presentation, it almost felt like I was traveling back in time, right? When I started at Prosieben in 2008, yes, we had a CDN which was doing basic website caching. Video on demand wasn't really an issue back then. There was no such things as pre-rolls and 7-day catch-up and all that stuff. So nobody cared about a CDN, what it was good for, why we should have one, and also what it costs. And nobody really cared about the CDN contract, which was about to change dramatically. Now what happened? In 2008, our management came back from a trip to the USA. They saw all the larger broadcaster websites doing video on demand and 7-day catch-up. So they said, okay, let's give it a try. Let's offer the full episodes of our most important TV format, which was Germany's Next Top Model at the time, a 7-day catch-up. Let's put it online. Let's see what happens. Give it a try. Well, what can I tell you? It was a major success. People watched the episodes after the show, in the next morning, during lunchtime, the next evening. It was overwhelming. Management got excited, created great business cases, and we had to produce as much content as possible at the best quality available, put it online. And all of this came to a halt by the end of the month when the next CDN invoice arrived. And it really spoiled the party because we managed to eat up 1 year's CDN budget within 1 month. And suddenly, everybody was aware that the CDN existed and why it's important and that it costs money and that it might make sense to look at the contract and its details. Which is what we did, and we found that we were paying more than 4 times the price that was average in the market at that time. And we also found that the contract was about to end in 2 months, so we made a new contract with a new partner, cut the price by 75%, and thereby gave our VOD business the chance to survive and to grow. Now, it did grow, got huge, got complex, and so let's look at some of the aspects and the numbers that I found interesting. When we started in 2008, there was only one device we were targeting. One bandwidth, one resolution, one video format. It was a PC. And today, we have iOS, we have Android, we have Windows Phone, we have tablet PCs, we have hybrid TV, we have, I don't know, sometimes I get the feeling that there's no device left that is not, doesn't have internet access and its own customized video on demand portal. We have SD, we have HD, we have different security standards, and when I imagine that back in 2008 we had only one transcoder which was sufficient to produce all our content, I got almost sentimental. Or look at the video views and how they developed. I mean, when we started, even though it was a major success, the numbers were quite low. In the meantime, we had a growth of 250% over those last 3 years. Or, which is the slide that I like most, look at the traffic costs. We managed to cut them by 97%, which is tremendous. Okay, the contract was bad, but never mind. So if we were charged today's traffic by 2008's traffic fee, we would pay, I think, 5 million euros a month. Look at the storage. I mean, back in 2008, nobody really cared about storage because there was nothing to store, right? We were just starting. And, well, in the meantime, we created a huge archive, which is shown by the growth of 5,000%. And this has been ignored for too long, but it turned out that it costs money, and that it really costs money. And this is something that we'll talk about later in more detail. And another area that changed dramatically, I mean, in 2008 we had, I think, 12 live streaming events with 10 hours in total for the whole year. In the meantime, it grew and grew up to 1,000 hours a year, which is not as much as we would like to do, but the way we do live streaming today has become too expensive. It's one of the challenges we'll have a deeper look into later on. So what, you may ask, what's the conclusion? Is there a conclusion? What did we learn? Well, let me put it this way. Back in 2008, the whole video on demand business, at least for us, was felt like a little baby, right? It was brand new. You didn't know how huge it would grow, how it would look like when it's grown up. Everybody liked it somehow. Nobody really took it serious. And today it feels more like a teenager. It has grown a lot. You can really watch it growing almost every day. It changes its look every day. Today it's a PC, tomorrow it's mobile, the other day it's hybrid. And it has become demanding in terms of quality, security, traffic, and also costs a lot, like every ordinary teenager. And the adults, the traditional broadcasters, start to recognize that there is something that has become relevant and that might be a threat for some of them one day. Now, what else did I learn? Well, one of the lessons I learned is a quite frustrating one. When I look back, I found that whenever we solved one problem and whenever we managed to meet one challenge, we created the next one. So in the beginning, everybody was happy with small video clips, with blurry, was full of artifacts at a low quality. And suddenly, there was a business case, and everybody wanted to have huge resolutions, high traffic, a high bandwidth, best quality. When you manage to provide this, you find that it costs money, and you have to cut the traffic price. And well, in the end, you have thousands of devices. At least it feels like it's thousands of them. Some of them being a security nightmare when it comes to DRM. And you piled up a huge amount of storage, which is eating up your budget. Now, enough of that. Let's go to today's real-life challenges. I picked nothing spectacular, only a few of the things we are dealing with right now at Prosieben. So there is the first one, which is digital archive. I mean, I call it the storage trap, right? For a long time, we really didn't care about the archive. I mean, we produced and produced and produced, and after a few years, we found out that in the meantime, the cost for storage eats up 25% of the whole CDN budget. And that is growing from year to year. And honestly, the storage growth is much faster than the storage price per gigabyte goes down. So this is really an issue, and this is something that has really heavy impact on the business case. And I'm really curious to learn if you have the same problems, and if you manage to solve them, then please tell me. The second thing is live streaming. Now, live streaming is something that we are really keen to do, and we'd love to do 24 hours a day if we had the rights, of course. But the way we do it right now doesn't scale anymore. We have an operator sitting next to the transcoder who pushes the button whenever we reach a commercial break on TV, because we want to play ads from our online ad server. So there is lots of manpower involved. And when you imagine doing that 24 hours a day, this will not work. We need some sort of automated functionality, some sort of integrated workflow with the broadcast guys, so there's the same person who's controlling the broadcast also controls the live stream for the online business. Again, curious to see how you handle this. And the third issue I'd like to discuss with you is the multi-CDN strategy. I mean, today we use one CDN for ad VOD, and we use the other CDN for pay VOD, and that's it. And we have conflicting goals. On the other hand, on the one hand, we try to leverage all the functionality that a specific CDN provides, right? Like EdgeSite includes, like using their origin storage to reduce costs, leverage all their specific security features and so on. On the other hand, we'd like to be independent. We'd like to have more than one CDN. We like to have a pool of CDNs in order to scale when live events and unforeseen traffic peaks come along. And honestly, we haven't found the ideal way to deal with this until today. And now, let's quickly look at one little thing that I found quite interesting. That is hybrid TV. To be honest, I ignored the whole hybrid TV stuff for a very long time. And which changed the day I was made responsible for the whole stuff. And I found something interesting. There is this red button on them TV remotes, which enables you to open this hybrid TV portal and see all kinds of interesting stuff. And I found out that our sales guys found an interesting way to make additional money. They decided to brand this red button during commercial TV breaks. So far so good, you may say, but nobody realized is that the moment this commercial break is played out, all the connected hybrid TVs simultaneously request the branded ad. Okay, thanks God, today it's only an image, and the market penetration is still very low, but imagine each and every TV set out there is hybrid and it's connected. And it's not an image, it's an HD trailer. And it happens every 20 seconds because maybe those kinds of campaigns have become standard. Then you see millions of concurrent connections to one little bit of content, and 10 seconds later you see that again and again and again and again. I think this is really a challenge for us, but an even a greater challenge for the CDNs, I guess. Well, and that's it for me. Thanks for your attention.
Great, thanks, Michael. Richard, I'd like to invite you back up to come and join in a bit of a joint Q&A session. While the guys get seated, can I just get a few shows of hands here? Who's from what I'd call a traditional CDN? So I know we've got Chris from Limelight here. There are other people from the traditional overlay CDNs and the CDNs that have been around for, say, 10 years here. Okay, it's a low representation. And operator CDNs or telco CDNs. Who's from a telco trying to address their CDN strategy? It's okay, I won't bite. You can put your hands up, okay. Hosting centers, I know we've got a few. Yep, yeah, they should be here. They're sponsoring the day. We've got some content providers. Who are the content providers? It's quite unusual having content providers at a CDN conference, at least admitting it. And who? What else have we got here? Shout out. What are you guys doing? You can talk. Come on, talk. What have we got here? We got application vendors, application server developers, spies, espionage. I don't know. What have we got here? Okay. All right. Well, listen. I'm just going to we're running a little bit late, so the Q&A is not going to be too long. I'm sure the guys are happy about that. But just a first question. Having seen each other's presentations, what would you guys say were the key differences in the challenges you both face? Are there differences by being the BBC and by being Prosieben?
Well, I mean, there's one common challenge, which is the cost model for delivering media online. And I didn't put the chart up around the unit pricing changes that we've seen over time, but we are dependent on unit pricing going down. For every single part of the equation, I mean, it's not that the costs aren't just the CDN costs, they're obviously a part of it. Storage is an entertaining challenge for us as well. Rights and everything associated with automation. And we work continuously on all of those to try and make sure we offset as far as possible the issue of increased consumption and increased volume of content made available against economies around everything around delivery. Yeah, so I think that's a common story.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious, but I used to run a small CDN, and we ended up in the face of the sort of American giants having to discount storage to zero. And although I closed that CDN 18 months ago, I'm intrigued that both of you are seeing increasing storage costs. I got the impression that storage was being loss-led, if nothing else, by the CDNs.
So the CDN storage is only one part of it. Even if you've got CDN storage, we kind of like to keep a copy or two ourselves. We do all the transcoding ourselves. So and in order to make sure that we get the best quality video at the lowest bit rate, We do transcoding directly from the same source that we use for our broadcast channels. So that's all automated, but it's kind of 50i quality video coming in. We store intermediate versions of that so that you don't have to transcode everything again, given that a large amount of material tends to get repeated over time. We produce it in a zillion formats, so while storage might be cheap, we have an awful lot of copies of this material. And our model at the moment is we tend to manage all the origins ourselves, and we go for a very high availability on that. So it's all multi-data center. So if we lose a data center, then we've still got all our origin up and running. So it's transparent to users, which is all great from a service perspective. But you take the multiplier that puts on the amount of storage we have to use is quite high. And we always want to use the cheap storage, obviously, but we tend to find that we do get some performance demands over the content that we deliver. We're never quite sure. It's one thing I'd love from CDNs, actually, is more determinism around how hard they're going to come back and hit our origin. And so we have a certain amount of performance we have to put on that. And don't believe everything you read about all these clever hierarchical things. It always gets a bit more complicated than that.
So you don't use CDN storage, right?
We do a little bit, but one of the consequences of going for a multi-CDN strategy is that ultimately we try and keep the CDN role simple and similar across all the CDNs, and so we tend to run Origin ourselves.
Okay.
So do you think you're going to increasingly rely on CDNs to transformat, transrate, transmux the files, or do you see that as your responsibility still?
So I think we're going to see how that goes. At the moment we've got quite a nice piece of machinery that we built over the years, which allows us to produce a reasonable number of formats. But the number of formats keeps going up. It's terribly tedious for live. It's for on-demand is one thing, and then producing all those formats for live, actually, we're finding quite a challenge. And so we are in discussion with the various CDNs around the best ways of doing this. And certainly for live material, it's quite attractive just to provide a single format to the CDN and get the CDN to do everything. However, on the other side, live is where there's interesting opportunities in terms of live not just being live, but one of the things that IP can really deliver is seamlessly changing live to on-demand. So if you're 10 minutes late for the beginning of a program, if you come to an IP stream, doesn't matter, just scroll back 10 minutes and get the beginning of your program, the beginning of the event or whatever. And as soon as you get into that world, then it gets a little bit more complicated again. And so, to be honest, the jury's out in terms of how much of that we do and how much of that the CDNs do. Over time, as these things get more mature, and I like your analogy of the adolescent child, as these things get more mature, we would expect the CDNs to be doing more and more of it. We only do that stuff that we really feel that we have to do.
And so, I apologise, Michael, I'm slightly more familiar with the BBC's setup, but I know that you traditionally have had a strategy to use CDNs and also to provide content directly from what's ostensibly your own ISP configuration, so to deliver directly from your own servers to the end users on the UK setup, or do you now exclusively connect to the end users through CDNs?
No, it's fine. BBC Online was put together a long time ago. I think we started in earnest, officially in earnest, in 97. We built out, at that point, most of the technology ourselves. So we operated the data center ourselves, we operate the servers ourselves, and within the UK, then we operate a network, we appear on an AS, and we peer with all of the major, and minor for that matter, UK ISPs. So we operate all of that ourselves. It's optimized for delivery into the UK. We used to do a bit of that over the pond as well, but we've stopped that now. And now it's a case of economics, actually. For that stuff where we can do it more effectively ourselves, then we deliver it ourselves over using our servers and our networks. And where CDNs can do a better job, then we get CDNs to do it. It's now an issue around being able to react quickly and what the ROI looks like that determines whether we do it ourselves or whether we get CDNs to do it.
And so, do you see network neutrality issues hitting that? Because obviously if it's cheaper to use BT's network directly as an ASP peer or Virgin's network here in the UK, and the operators then laying out the cost on the internal infrastructure in their operator CDN to do that, it's quite nice. They're paying. You don't have to pay them, whereas if you use a CDN, ostensibly you're going to get a bill at the end of the month.
Well, there's not a difference between us doing it on a CDN doing the delivery from the economics of the internet. You know, in both cases, it's the job of the content provider to provide the content and get it onto the internet, and it's the job of the ISP to take it off the internet and deliver it through to their customers in the home. I mean, we'll see what's going to happen with operator ISPs. I mean, that is a I can understand why operators are putting them in. That
Operator
slide,
CDNs.
what did I say?
ISPs.
Sorry,
yeah.
operator CDNs. That slide that I put up, which kind of shows the responsibility of the end-to-end chain, it is a complicated thing to try and provide quality of service, and I'm not surprised to see ISPs putting CDNs on the network, A, to get around that, and B, to look and see if they can get a two-sided business model. Obviously, from our perspective, that then becomes a monopoly supply into that network, which doesn't look like a very healthy thing. There were no operator CDN people in the room, I think. No,
Nobody put their hands up. I'm quite
didn't put their
surprised.
hands up. If not, maybe they'd like to come back on this. I think, you know, it is a risk of monopolistic supply, which does have a risk around net neutrality, and so isn't a direction that we're terribly enthusiastic about. But also, you know, just that chart that I put up that shows the increase in average speed delivery, you know, combined with the products that ISPs are offering these days of 40 to 50 megabits per second delivery into the home. When you get those sorts of numbers, and we're delivering a paltry 1,500 kilobits a second for standard def video, you really wouldn't expect, you know, the expectation of people in the home is that you shouldn't just be able to get it from one source. You know, if you've got video on the internet at that bit rate, you just expect it to work. So we'll see where that goes.
And do you talking about the issues of caching in the operators and so on? I'm not sure personally exactly where the legal frameworks and the regulatory issues are at the moment, but there's always been discussion around caching content within third-party networks that as being something that fringes on being more than mere conduit for the ISP and so on. So copies of films that are stored in third-party ISP networks, then does that present an issue for you as content providers with the rights clearance that you have? Do you have restrictions on your CDNs being able to store content in transit for very long? There's often a discussion about that.
Well, not really, to be honest. I mean, we separate completely between licensed content and owned content, and I think it's only 2 or 3% that is really licensed from third parties. In that case, of course, we apply some security restrictions, but caching in the CDN network is not an issue.
I mean, I think when you go to, you know, people remember back to the early days of the internet, where it was quite common for ISPs to manage caches within their network for images and so on, and it's still common for companies at their network edge to have caches there. And as you get into a chunked HTTP delivery, where typically the content within each chunk is encrypted and so protected from a storage perspective, and now it's just a file like any other file, the opportunity to be able to cache that deep into the network, if you choose to do so, becomes possible. In fact, you know, theoretically it could become quite hard to stop, but it opens up an opportunity then for operators to be able to play with their distribution models. You know, they can carry it straight through, or if they want to put a cache deeper into the network, that might give them an advantage against another operator potentially in terms of the quality of delivery through to the end user, and at the same time reducing the bandwidth deeper in the network.
And some of these technologies, the adaptive bitrate technologies, while they offer a lot of new functionality, they do have scaling issues when it comes to live. Are these you know, both of you have spoken about the challenge of doing live. As I'm sure you both know, well, certainly Richard does, my pet hobby horse is always multicast support within ISPs, within telcos. It always seems like something that's just out of reach. What do you think is going to be the solutions, or how do you think, as the connected TV demands more linear content, how do you think the CDNs can help you more as you want to scale out your linear or live delivery? Is it just throwing HTTP caching at the solution? Is that the solution?
It's always seemed to me inevitable that as you get the volume up for live delivery over IP, you have to go to a multicast model. You know, the numbers that we deal with at the moment are getting bigger all the time. You know, a couple of years ago, then if we got up to 100,000 people, so a large stadium sort of continuously viewing, that would be a big event. You know, we haven't yet got over the million mark in terms of concurrent users of streams. We might get there next year. Who knows? I talked about the Olympics, but before the Olympics, we've got European football. So England have actually finally managed to qualify for that this time, which is remarkable. And so it's about time we had another, England-Germany game, which traditionally is even at the end of the second half, and so goes into penalties. And if we have one of those on a Friday afternoon when people are at work, we might get over the million concurrent. And it seems to me, it's just nuts to deliver a million streams of exactly the same content, where you can split them further down. People want to watch the live stuff. It obviously doesn't work as soon as you get into live rewind, but for live content, it's inevitable to me that if there's actually going to survive over IP when we really get to the high volumes, we're going to have a solution like multicast in there. It's proving difficult. I can hear the echoes of me saying exactly the same words about 10 years ago, and we haven't got there yet. That being said, we have done some trials now, which at any rate is something. We're having more serious conversations around it, but it's not proving an easy one to crack.
Okay, we've got a couple of minutes before we break for coffee. Are there any questions from the floor you guys would like to venture? Andreas?
Two questions on the mobile adoption. As Thomson Reuters in the news, we see that mobile users are a lot more active than PC users. Number of usage as well as eyeball time. Do you see something similar already in mobile compared to PC users?
So we see there's a lot of usage, but it tends to be much easier to deliver. It's kind of lower bit rate and consumption periods tend to be shorter, unless what they're doing is the bedtime TV, where they have a kind of typical catch-up TV profile in terms of consumption times. It's just the time of day that's a little bit different. But otherwise, during the day, we tend to see consumption times quite short. So at the moment, although mobile has been growing very rapidly, we're not seeing that as so much of a problem in terms of supporting from a delivery perspective. And I'm more concerned about what happens as, it's almost impossible now to go into a shop, buy a TV. It doesn't have an Ethernet socket on the side. And for those people who've bred their own IT support unit in the form of children, then they're the people who then cause the TV to become connected. And it's very early days, but that's the area that I'm concerned about, where we could see very significant volumes of consumption.
Yeah, we see very similar usage at Prosieben as well. And also here the overall volume for mobile is neglectable. But as you said, hybrid TV is a real challenge. And by then we should have some sort of multicast solution, definitely.
And just the second question, do you consider the delay of HTTP-based distribution technologies a problem in your live streaming aspirations?
Sorry, what do you mean?
The delay of HDS, HLS.
Oh, as in the latency.
Latency, yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. We did a mixture of RTMP and HTTP streaming for the World Cup football in 2010. And RTMP has much lower latency, or certainly our implementation of it had much lower latency. And we didn't try very hard on the HTTP delivery, and we didn't anticipate that there would be people who would be in environments where there was broadcast telly available and people watching the RTMP streams and people watching the HTTP streams. And the difference between the fastest and the slowest stream in terms of the time of arriving there was about 45 seconds. And that actually ends up being a major problem. You hear someone screaming goal over one side, and 45 seconds later, kind of the edge is taken off the anticipation. It's just who's going to score. Most of what we do, actually, the time limit is not that important, provided that there are kind of two things. One is you don't have access to, simultaneously in the same area to another stream which comes through at a different rate. So we don't do gambling or something like that, which is temporarily very important. And the other thing that's important is to make sure for live events that you're synchronizing your data and your video. Because we had, it was the Winter Olympics. When was that, last year? Year before? Can't remember. And we did have one period during the ski jumping where the data that we produced on the same screen as the video, the data would tell you how far the guy had jumped before the video showed the jump. And obviously, synchronizing those things is something we're working very hard, and I'm hoping we'll have that completely cracked for the Olympics. And after that, then I'm not sure we're that sensitive on latency. We'll see. We obviously try and keep it as short as possible, but I don't think it's that big a deal.
Okay, time for one more question. Yeah, back please.
We have a relatively
Oh, can I just bring the microphone up to you because we're recording? So, thanks. Volunteer-led microphoning. Thank you.
Yaroslav Gorodetsky, CDN Video, Russia. You mentioned multicast as a means for a huge amount of live streaming simultaneous, like 1 million subscribers, simultaneously watching football. What do you think about perspectives of peer-to-peer streaming as an alternative to multicast for these cases?
We had a go at peer-to-peer. We've not tried peer-to-peer for live streaming. We did try it for on-demand delivery. And I think peer-to-peer is very, very interesting technology, but we found two problems with it. One is just the complexity of operating a peer-to-peer network. And actually, for us, the complexity and the cost associated with that complexity, both in terms of infrastructure licenses and the operating costs associated with it, then didn't marry up against the reduced costs we were seeing of very straightforward server-to-client delivery. So that's problem number one. And problem number two we found for peer-to-peer delivery is where ISPs have a cap to individual users. So say you're on a fairly low tier one and you get a 10 gigabyte cap per month. And some ISPs have that cap as being the sum of your upstream and downstream traffic. And we then get very nervous about the idea of using a peer-to-peer network to deliver something where the consequence of us offsetting costs into the peer-to-peer network is some poor old person there might be taken over the cap and get an additional charge because they were contributing to our delivery. Add to that as well, the architecture within the UK ISP networks at the moment doesn't really lend itself to peer-to-peer because you tend to have even if the person is next door that you're sharing content with, in fact, you're coming all the way back on the backhaul, all the way back into one of the regional nodes before you hop across at the first point where the IP is routable and you go all the way back down again. So it's not as efficient yet as it could be. And I think it's an interesting one to watch.
You do end up with some inverse scaling issues with peer-to-peer as well, where you actually need more people at the centre of the network to feed people upstream from you, which is quite interesting.
And live streaming is very, very difficult as well. I mean, there are some companies which have made great strides on this, but it does get complicated on the basis that you want to get your live stream up and running very quickly. And in some cases, that's we'll kick off the live stream first, going for a straightforward unicast delivery while looking for peers, and when they're available, we'll start bringing them in. But if that's the strategy that's followed, you still got to hit that initial peak. And what we find these days is for breaking news stories, Twitter, bless it, drives people very rapidly. When something interesting happens, people are on it very, very quickly. And the rate at which they join our streams when we've got a major breaking news story is phenomenal. And one of the challenges for those networks is actually to get a peer network up and running fast enough so that actually we don't find that we're having to meet the peak demand through unicast, which is and if we have to do that, we might as well have done that at the beginning.
And in our case, whenever we try to start a peer-to-peer test case, I always get stopped by the legal department because when they hear the word peer-to-peer, I don't know what happens to them, but it's nothing good.
And I suppose final point on that, and I'll shut up, is it usually involves installing something on the client.
Yeah, that's right.
And as far as possible, we try and avoid that. Because as I kind of mentioned earlier, we do actually get a fair amount of viewing that happens at work time, so it's not necessarily on your home PC. You don't necessarily have local admin rights on these things. And the second is people just don't like having to install stuff. So we tend to try and back away from dedicated clients that you have to install just to be able to watch our content.
Okay, so Richard, Michael, thank you very much. I'd like a round of applause for these guys. So the aim of this opening session is to contextualise us and actually have some content providers talking about what they need from CDNs. But after the break, we're going to talk to two of the largest CDNs, or hear from two of the largest CDNs, about how their two different architectures deliver a similar solution in slightly different ways. So please go forth and network, share business cards, drink coffee, and sign up on the social networking board, which is just a whiteboard, which you put your email on. And I'll see you after the break. Thank you.